Hey folks, thanks for tuning in to Pindrop Perspectives. This week our hosts Mark and Jen are reviewing a live-action TV project with a character who is known around the world. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the latest episode.
All right, so strap in, everybody, because today we are going deep on Arachnid.
Oh, yeah.
This is this potential TV series, and you guys sent in a ton of stuff.
Yeah.
The pitch Bible character bios, even some episode outlines.
Movie stuff, yeah.
It's like we've got our own spider sense for finding cool TV.
It's very cool. This one, I'm really interested to see where this goes.
Yeah, me too. I think it's got a lot of potential.
Well, one thing's for sure right off the bat, this is not your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
No.
This is something completely different. They're going for a much darker, grittier feel.
Yeah.
You know, think like Daredevil on Netflix, where the city almost felt like another character.
Oh, for sure. And this Peter Parker, he's pushing 40.
Yeah, he's seen some stuff.
Yeah, and he's wrestling with some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
It makes you think, like, how would you handle decades of, being Spider-Man and all the baggage that comes with it?
Right, and all the villains he's fought and all the people he couldn't save.
Exactly.
Like, how would you even function as a human after all that?
And what's interesting, too, is they don't shy away from that.
No, they lean right into it.
Yeah, they put it front and center. So he's working as a cameraman.
Yeah.
For none other than Kelly Jameson.
Oh, wow. Talk about awkward family dinners.
Right. Like, that's a whole other level of tension there. But it's also not just, like, personal drama.
No.
They've woven in this really clever plot point where he's working on this documentary.
Oh, yeah.
About the Battle of Bay Bridge, which we know was his last stand as Spider-Man.
Right. So we know this is directly connected to his retirement.
Exactly. So they're confronting that idea of like a hero's legacy head on.
Yeah. The cost of being Spider-Man.
Yeah. And the scars that it leaves behind, literally and figuratively.
Yeah. And you know what? I think that's one of the things that drew me to this pitch.
You too? Yeah.
It's this idea of Spider-Man past his prime.
Right. Like, what happens when the cheering stops?
Yeah. Is he still a hero when nobody's watching?
Exactly. And they really dig into that with the villains, too.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, he's forced to confront Tombstone.
Ah, classic Spidey villain.
Yeah. But it feels like they're elevating him in this.
Yeah.
To almost like a Kingpin level threat.
Someone who represents like systemic corruption, not just street crime.
Yeah, like he's really become a force to be reckoned with in this version of New York.
Yeah. It's a New York that feels even more broken and corrupt than we've seen before.
Yeah, and that's got to weigh heavily on Peter, even if he's trying to stay retired.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the city itself is calling him back into action.
And, it speaks to something we were talking about before we started recording.
Yeah.
About how the creators seem to really understand Spider-Man's rogues gallery.
Yeah.
They're not just throwing in familiar names for the sake of it.
Right.
They're choosing villains who reflect the themes they're exploring.
Exactly, like Tombstone representing the decay of the city.
Yeah, and speaking of heavy hitters, we can't forget about the elephant, or rather the symbiote in the room.
Oh yeah, here we go, Venom.
Right. I mean, that's a bold move, introducing Venom so early on.
Yeah, it immediately raises the stakes.
Oh, absolutely.
And it tells us these creators aren't afraid to go there.
Yeah, and it sounds like they're putting their own spin on it, too.
They are, and this isn't the Venom we're used to.
Yeah.
It's not Eddie Brock. They've created a new host, a young soldier named Corporal Finch.
That's interesting.
Really interesting choice. Makes you think, how would you react if you were suddenly bonded to this alien creature?
Right, because it's not just like the physical transformation.
It's the psychological torment.
Yeah, that internal struggle between good and evil.
Exactly. And it's not like Eddie Brock, who was already kind of a troubled soul.
Right.
This is a soldier, someone who's sworn to protect others, and now he's got this monster inside him.
And, it makes you think about that classic Spider-Man theme of man versus himself.
Mm-hmm.
But they've taken it to a whole other level.
Yeah, like Finch is caught between his duty, his own morality, and this creature pushing him toward darkness.
And all of this is happening while Peter is trying to figure out if he can even be Spider-Man again.
Right, he's not just dealing with one enemy, he's dealing with two, and one of them is himself.
Yeah, it's like they're saying that even when you hang up the mask, the past always comes back to haunt you.
And sometimes it comes back with a vengeance.
And you know what's really cool is they've almost made the city itself a reflection of Peter's inner turmoil.
Yeah, like this New York is scarred, disillusioned, grappling with its own sense of loss after the Battle of Bay Bridge.
Yeah, it's like they're saying even a city can bear the psychological wounds of a superhero's life.
And within that landscape, you've got this intricate web of characters.
Yeah.
Each representing different forms of power and how they use it.
You've got Kelly Jameson running the media empire.
Right.
Colonel Grayson, the mastermind behind Venom's escape-wielding military might.
And then you have Beverly Creighton, this reporter, who seems to be walking that line between ambition and truth-seeking.
Yeah, it makes you think about how the media itself shapes our perception of heroes and villains.
Absolutely. Like, who controls the narrative? Who decides who's the good guy and who's the bad guy?
And it's like they're saying everyone in this world is affected by the ripples of Spider-Man's actions, whether they realize it or not.
Right. Like, his choices have consequences that reach far beyond his own life.
And speaking of ripples, we've got to talk about these episode outlines. They're packed with detail, from a new suit to flashbacks to Peter's past.
Even a visit to a dying Dr. Octopus in Ravencroft.
Which I'm really curious about.
Me too.
And it's not just fan service, right?
No.
Each element seems to have a purpose tying into those deeper themes.
Exactly like that visit to Doc Ock. It forces Peter to confront the legacy of his actions, the people he's hurt, even his enemies.
Like a reckoning for his past sins.
And speaking of reckoning, how about that cliffhanger at the end of episode 8?
Oh, man.
Colonel Grayson breaking into a high-security prison, delivering a sample of Venom's DNA?
What's he up to?
What kind of chaos is he about to unleash who's in that cell?
It's like a classic villain behind the villain reveal.
But it's also more than that. It suggests a connection between Venom and a whole other layer of the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, it's like they're planting seeds for a whole franchise here.
But without losing sight of that grounded, character-driven focus.
Yeah, and what's striking is how much thought they've put into the why behind every choice.
Yeah, it's not just about throwing Spidey into a new situation.
Right.
It's about exploring how that situation changes him on a fundamental level.
Exactly, and that's what makes this concept so compelling, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a rehash. It's a true evolution of the character, a deep dive into what it means to be Spider-Man when the cheering stops and you're left with the echoes of your choices.
It's like they're asking what happens when the legend becomes the burden.
That's good. Yeah, I like it.
And how do you live with that burden? How do you keep going when the world has moved on?
And I think that's a question that a lot of people are asking themselves these days.
I think so too.
You know, in a world where it feels like everything is falling apart,
Yeah.
where do we find the hope, the strength to keep fighting?
And maybe that's what Arachnid is trying to show us.
Maybe it's not about escaping reality, but about confronting it head on.
With all the messiness and uncertainty that entails.
And finding a way to be a hero even in the darkest of times.
I like that. I think that's a great place to leave it for now.
All right, we'll be back after a quick break to dive even deeper into Arachnid.
Like this episode? Make sure you check out the podcast for Spec Script, Daredevil Without Fear, from Pindrop Perspectives, airing next month. Now let's get back to our deep dive on Arachnid.
And the way they weave in those supporting characters, it's not just window dressing.
Yeah.
They each represent a different facet of that burden that Peter's carrying.
You're right. It's like they're holding up a mirror to his world.
Yeah.
You've got Kelly struggling to live up to her father's legacy,
Right.
wrestling with the power of the media.
And then there's Colonel Grayson representing that military-industrial complex,
Yeah.
willing to cross lines in the name of security.
And even Beverly Creighton, the reporter.
Yeah, she's interesting.
She embodies that hunger for the truth, but also the compromises sometimes made in that pursuit.
Right. Like, how far are you willing to go to get the story?
Yeah, and is it ever okay to bend the rules even a little?
Especially when you're dealing with powerful people who want to keep things hidden.
Exactly. It's like they're asking who watches the Watchmen, even when the Watchman is trying to retire.
Because even when you step back from being a hero, the world doesn't stop needing one.
And the people you care about are still in danger.
And that's what pulls Peter back in.
Yeah.
It's not some grand sense of duty.
No.
It's the people he loves.
That's the brilliance of this concept, right?
Yeah.
It takes that classic Spider-Man theme of isolation and cranks it up a notch.
He's not just a teenager hiding his identity anymore.
Right.
He's a man who's seen the worst of humanity. And that knowledge has to shape every interaction.
And the episode outlines really dive into that.
Yeah.
Like in episode 3, when Spider-Man reluctantly returns to help the police take down Tombstone.
That episode is a turning point.
Yeah.
Not just for the plot, but for Peter's character arc.
He's forced back into the mask. Not out of some grand sense of duty, but because the people he cares about are in danger.
It's like they're stripping away that super heroic idealism and showing us the raw human instinct to protect those we love.
And it makes you question, is that enough to be a hero?
Yeah.
Is it enough to keep going when the world has moved on, when maybe they've forgotten what you sacrificed?
It's a question that I think a lot of us can relate to,
Yeah.
even without the superpowers.
We all face moments where we have to decide what we're willing to fight for.
What compromises we're willing to make.
Absolutely. And in that sense, Arachnid becomes more than just a superhero story.
Yeah.
It's a reflection on those universal struggles, but played out on a grander scale.
And they don't shy away from the consequences of those struggles,
Right.
like that visit to Dr. Octopus in Ravencroft.
Yeah, so heartbreaking.
But it's also such a powerful moment of self-reflection for Peter.
It's like he's finally confronting the ghosts of his past,
Yeah.
realizing that even a hero can't escape the ripple effects of his actions.
And it makes you think, if you had the chance to go back and change things, would you?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Even if it meant altering who you are today.
That's the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night.
Right. And that's what makes this concept so captivating.
Yeah.
It's not just about the action or the spectacle.
Right.
It's about those deeper moral dilemmas, those choices that define who we are.
And speaking of choices, the introduction of Corporal Finch adds a whole other layer of complexity to that.
Oh, yeah. He's a fascinating character.
He's essentially a victim manipulated by Colonel Grayson, but he's also bonded to Venom, this force of pure rage and chaos.
It's classic good versus evil, but
Yeah.
it's so much more nuanced than that.
Finch is struggling for control,
Yeah.
trying to hold on to his humanity.
But the symbiote is constantly tempting him, whispering in his ear.
It's like a metaphor for those dark impulses we all have.
Right.
Those moments where we have to choose between doing what's right and giving in to our baser instincts.
And the fact that it's happening to someone who is supposed to be a hero, a soldier, it's chilling.
It really is, and it adds a whole other layer of tension to Peter's story.
Yeah.
How do you fight an enemy that's literally feeding off of someone else's pain?
How do you save someone who's both victim and villain?
It's like they're saying that even with decades of experience, there are some battles Spider-Man might not be prepared for.
And that vulnerability, that sense of not having all the answers, it makes him feel more human, more relatable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes Arachnid stand out from other Spider-Man stories.
Yeah.
It's not just about punching bad guys and swinging through the city.
Right.
It's about the emotional weight of those choices, the consequences that linger long after the battle is over. It's a Spider-Man story for a more cynical, more world-weary audience.
Yeah, an audience that's seen the cracks in the facade of heroism.
But it's also a story that still believes in the power of redemption,
Mm-hmm.
in the idea that even when we fall, we can choose to get back up and keep fighting.
And that message, that resilience in the face of darkness,
Yeah.
it's something that transcends any particular genre or character,
It's a message that resonates with all of us.
regardless of whether we've ever worn a mask or swung from a web.
Absolutely. And as we move into the final part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I think it's important to keep that in mind.
Okay.
Arachnid might be a reimagining of a classic superhero,
Mm-hmm.
but it's ultimately a story about the human condition, about
Yeah.
the choices we make and the legacy we leave behind.
And I think it's that focus on character, on exploring those deeper themes,
Yeah,
that has the potential to make Arachnid something truly special.
I agree.
It's a story that could stay with you long after the credits roll.
Yeah.
A story that might even make you question your own definition of what it means to be a hero.
It's interesting how they take those classic Spider-Man themes,
Mm.
responsibility, sacrifice,
Yeah.
that struggle against impossible odds,
Yeah.
but they filter it through this lens of experience,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
of a man who's lived with the consequences of his choices for decades.
Mm. It's like, what does heroism look like when you're not young and idealistic anymore?
Yeah. Is it even possible to be a hero when you've seen how messy the world really is?
And I think that's what makes this Peter Parker so different. He's not just reacting to each situation.
Yeah.
He's bringing all that baggage, all that wisdom into every decision.
You know what makes me think about that question you brought up earlier?
Yeah.
About how would we handle being bonded to Venom?
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one.
This Peter Parker with his history, his regrets.
Yeah.
I almost feel like he'd understand Corporal Finch in a way that a younger Spider-Man wouldn't.
Oh, totally. There's almost a sense of kinship there, right? Like
Yeah.
two sides of the same coin. One man trying to reclaim control, the other trying to decide if control is even worth having.
And that could lead to some really powerful moments.
Definitely moments of empathy that we haven't really seen in other Venom stories.
It's almost like they're turning that whole enemy mine trope on its head.
Right. It's not about teaming up.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing a shared struggle,
A shared humanity.
even in the face of monstrous circumstances.
And speaking of humanity, we got to talk about the legacy aspect.
Oh, yeah, that's huge in this.
Spider-Man has always been about that balance between the ordinary and the extraordinary.
Absolutely. He's
Like-
the kid from Queens who became a symbol.
Right, but he never stopped being that kid.
Exactly. And in Arachnid, they're exploring what happens when that symbol starts to tarnish.
Yeah, when the weight of expectation becomes a burden.
More than a badge of honor.
And it's not just Peter's burden, right?
The whole city's carrying it.
They've seen the cost of heroism,
The fallout from all those battles.
but it makes you wonder, is it worth it?
Yeah. Is any hero, even Spider-Man, worth the collateral damage?
And that question, that cynicism, it feels very relevant to our times, don't you think?
Totally. We're bombarded with images of flawed heroes, broken systems.
The world just feels more and more complex,
Harder to navigate, for sure.
which is why this darker, more grounded take on Spider-Man could really resonate.
I think so, too.
It's not about escaping reality
It's about confronting it
head on.
with all the messiness and uncertainty.
But even in that darkness, there's still that glimmer of hope, right?
That's the heart of Spider-Man.
He always finds a way to get back up.
Keep fighting.
And that's what I think the creators are trying to tap into with Arachnid.
Yeah, that strength. To keep
Yeah.
going even when the world tells you to give up.
It's about finding heroism in those small acts of kindness,
In the everyday moments.
that refusal to let cynicism win.
And maybe that's the kind of Spider-Man we need right now.
Someone who's been through the fire,
Who knows the cost of battle?
but still chooses to stand up and protect those who can't protect themselves.
It's a powerful image, and I think it could have a real impact.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on Arachnid, I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay.
What kind of hero does the world need right now?
Ooh, good question.
Is it the bright-eyed idealist
Yeah.
or the battle-scarred veteran?
And more importantly, what kind of hero do you aspire to be?
It's something to think about, for sure.
Arachnid gives us a lot to chew on.
And we've only scratched the surface of this complex world.
But it's clear the creators are going for something special.
A Spider-Man story that's both timely and timeless.
A story that speaks to what it means to be human.
Even in a world that often feels anything but.
This has been The Deep Dive.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to Pindrop Perspectives. We hope you enjoyed the conversation around your not-so-friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Next week, Mark and Jen take a deep dive into an original dark tale involving a lottery, sacrifice, and what it takes to stay alive. Until then, remember, keep your perspective open. Artificial intelligence was used to assist in generating audio content for this episode.